My name is Ralph Ben-Murgy, and I host a podcast called Not That Kind of Rabbi. Basically, what I'm doing is looking for the spirit in people, what animates them to do what they do, and the kinds of stories they can tell. You know, people believe they don't have a story. Oh, no, I don't really have much of a story. And then when you talk to them or ask them questions, you'll find out everybody has a story and that they're all wonderful. I think it's a really good idea for us not to become parochial, not to just think of ourselves, the Jewish people this, the Jewish people that. So many people of different faiths and different inclinations have so much to offer to us as Jews, but also to the world in general. So I tend to look for the spark in people more than I look for the affiliation in them. To support our work at the CJN, go to thecjn.ca/donate. And if you're Canadian, you'll even get a tax receipt.
Yes, I think that the work I've done has been the ways of the people who really rally with me in easy ways of thinking about difference.
Man of Autism is dancing with that.
Hello, bonjour, shalom, and welcome to Culturally Jewish. On this week's episode, we chat with Estée Klar and her son Adam Wolfond, co-founders and co-directors of Disassembly, a lab for neurodiverse artists.
Mama always wanted me to be a doctor, but I became an artist and that really shocked her. Now I'm interviewing people in the biz, pros and newish, but all of them are artists and they're culturally Jewish.
Ilana, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
How is your new year going?
I feel like I'm avoiding talking about it because I'm trying to get by. Yeah, so basically I was on my way to LA. And our first few days in LA were incredible. There is so much going on here. The Jewish community is super welcoming. There's like 5 events like a day that you could go to for like 20s, 30s. And then the fire started. And to be honest, at first, I didn't even know about it in like the first few hours because it was so far from me. And my mom was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Huh?" Then I looked it up. And it got a little scary on Wednesday because there was a fire on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood. And I'm not in Hollywood, but close enough. We weren't in an evacuation zone, but it really freaked us out. And like so many people in our building were leaving. So we packed a bag. We, went to stay with a friend that lived like much further away. And luckily that fire got contained the next day. But it's just been like such an unreal experience. And the thing that to me has been like the most heartwarming thing to see. And, people say that when you go through a big natural disaster, community comes together. And I'm extremely impressed with the people here. Yesterday, we went to volunteer at a Legion that is in Hollywood, unpacking boxes, and everyone was working together. We had this like chain assembly line where we were taking things out of a U-Haul and bringing it in, and all over LA, people are donating and, doing what they can. And that has been really inspiring to see. But obviously it's put a big damper on everything. And I'm like, oh, all the things that I wanted to do suddenly have this weight on them because a lot of people don't really want to network and meet at this time where they might have lost their homes.
I can't imagine. Yes.
But I'm very lucky that where I am is quite central in LA and it's functioning and things are open. I'm wearing a mask outside just in case, even though the air is not as bad in my neighborhood. But like, it's you on certain days I could see smoke in the distance and that was really scary. But the firefighters are doing a great job. I saw that Quebec brought some helicopters and they were like scooping water out of the ocean. And I was like, yeah, Quebec, you came in, you're helping the cause.
Canada's come through, Israel's come through. Yeah,
I just really hope that for the sake of like everyone who's lost everything that this all ends soon. And, I'm not going to lie, I'm nervous about Trump coming into office and how that's going to change what's going on here, because right now about Biden's, been like, we're going to cover 100% of all the damages, and Trump hasn't really committed to anything yet. So let's hope.
That's a fair point.
That's what's going on here. It's a little crazy, but I think, there was a few days where a lot of theaters, like comedy clubs and all that, were like, we're going to take a few days off. And now things are back. So I have hope.
Well, definitely stay safe.
Thank you.
Be clear of everything. And I hope to hear more. And I hope things turn around a bit for LA and for you.
Thank you.
Now on for our interview today. As I mentioned earlier, Adam is a non-speaking autistic artist who will be collaborating with the Koffler Center on their Decade project. Now, as I'm saying that, you might be wondering how you will be able to hear him today for the interview. Adam is nonverbal, but he communicates with a text-to-speech tablet app. Estée, his mother, will also read out sometimes his answers because sometimes the computer doesn't capture the, shall I say, the natural flow of the conversation. He also holds a stick. Now, you won't be able to see it, obviously, but you will occasionally hear it throughout the interview. And we edited this interview for length and clarity. Let's take a listen.
I want to think with sticks. Thinking with sticks is like thinking about eager, open space. I want to write on sticks in space and the watching of radical thinking.
Estée and Adam, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's such a pleasure to have you both.
Thank you so much for having us.
So, Estée, I'll start with you. What's the origin story of working together with your son artistically and creating projects centered around neurodiversity?
The origin story, it's a great way of phrasing it. The origin story really begins with exclusion of non-speaking autistic people in Canada and in Toronto. And that by exclusion, I mean that many autistic people who are non-speaking or have different somatic movements considered quote unquote disruptive to a classroom don't have access to education and study. And there have been so many hurdles to even get into a school, like the public school boards would say, oh, well, we can't have an assistant in class, with Adam because it's an assisted communication that has a touch on his back to activate his movement. Because with apraxia, which is the clinical term, means you have motor planning difficulties, like planning to move your arm towards a keyboard, or it results in this inability to speak. That it became like a creative methodology where Adam's words, by your very nature, your indigenous language, some would say is poetic. It moves differently. It moves along with his body and his tics. He calls himself, I am the masterful ticker. So, he's reclaiming those body movements that have been pathologized. And then through that, and with my visual arts background, it really inspired me to think about movement, autistic movement, what people have characterized as pathology and behavior through drawing. So I was drawing the movements and noticing that I could activate Adam's movement by moving my own body. I couldn't do it with words and say, you have to get out the door. You got to get out the door. That would just create more anxiety in you, Adam. Then I was noticing how bodies would even be resistant to normative methods, sit still, sit up straight, look at me, those kinds of things in a classroom where autistic people would have real difficulty. And so I call those drawings relationships. And so we developed this really relational approach to learning and to being together instead of looking at autism through solely this pathology lens.
And it seems like you have so much knowledge and so much understanding and so much research based on all of this. Was this before even Adam was born, or did you sort of have to go on a kind of journey to support him as he grew?
I think I was always frustrated by reductive knowledge, like this causes that. I think by nature, I was more open through my artistic background. So I have previous degrees in art history and studio arts. And then, of course, when Adam was born, it was from the get-go, when he was diagnosed at 18 months of age, so he was very, very young, I was thrown right into that pathology paradigm. We call it the pathology paradigm. And that means that in our doors rotated behaviorists, psychologists, people who were really trying to medicate early on. I didn't like the feeling of that.
So, Adam, I would love to hear from you what your experience has been like creating artistic works as a way to work through your autism and neurodivergence, and what it was like working with your mom. What did you learn as you went along?
Yes, I learned that I can think about many things, and now I am finishing my master's degree.
Adam is the first Canadian autistic non-speaking person to attend a university.
Wow.
So that's, we even tried, sorry to say, some critical disability studies departments who couldn't get beyond the administration and the prerequisites there. So it was really important to find an ally within the university. And he had gathered and garnered so much previous work for his portfolio that he could enter with a professor, Aaron Manning at Concordia University, doing his he's finishing his master's degree now.
It's very interesting because as I was looking through the website, and we'll talk about disassembly in a moment, but both of your individual websites and disassembly, I am so impressed by your body of work, Adam. I think a lot of people of your age haven't done as much. And it made me even think, because of the differences that you've had to work through, it actually inspired a lot of artistic expression, a lot of writing, a lot of poetry. And there's something quite incredible about that.
Yes, I think that the work I've done has been the ways of the people who really rally with me in easy ways of thinking about difference.
Man of autism is dancing with that, and people will need more autistic answers to think with.
I want to talk a bit about the lab now, disassembly. Can you tell us how it first came into existence, and maybe what did you find missing or lacking in the art world that disassembly could potentially fill?
There's been a lot of work by autistic people. But creatively, I always felt like in the art world that autistic art has been relegated to, savantism, giftedness. It's like, sort of like this other way of still keeping autism within the pathology paradigm and not as like a really important knowledge contribution, that we as a human species are all different. And, what if you're neurodivergent, if you're autistic, we all have different ways of seeing the world, literally in our bodies, or even culturally, right? So artistically, curatorially, I feel that there's a huge gap missing in showing and contributing that work. And the other thing is the collaboration aspect of support. So you see that people won't see it on the podcast. You see I have to touch Adam's back to activate his movement, and that's critical. Nobody teaches that really in Canada, this method of supportive communication, or really understands why that's necessary. So this concept of independence, authorship, mastery in the art world or in the literary world are really predominant. And disassembly as a collaborative is really, really important to bring back this visibility back into the supports many disabled people need to contribute, and getting away from this idea that we're all masters, like we're, celebrate my mastery in this artistic work is really silly.
I want to talk about a specific piece that, Adam, you wrote called The Aspects of Talking and How I Am Like Moses. Of course, we're going to talk about the Jewish piece. So this piece features your bar mitzvah preparation and your Dvar Torah and how you connected with the aspect of Moses being a stutterer. Can you tell us about this piece and how Judaism plays a role in your work?
Yes, I think that my work feels with Judaism because the world needs more love and peace, and that means that is feeling acceptance of all people and all life, and the way of repair of the world is what Assembly of Good People is all about.
Thank you, Adam.
Now, this is not the same thing, but I grew up with something called retrieval problems, which is when a child knows and understands a word, but really has trouble retrieving it and using it in speech. And my mother would always tell the story of how she would ask me what I wanted for dinner. And instead of speaking what I wanted, I would draw, with my finger, the image of, let's say, a hot dog. And Adam, I was wondering, does creating your art ever feel like finding your voice, or does it express something that words maybe never even could?
Yes, I think that I am lucky to access typing, and this way of languaging is pacing with your questions. And this means that is the pace of the
atmospheres that cue my body to call upon my words, to lend my thoughts. So I want to say that I am dancing to many rhythms, and my assistant grounds me to type and to make artful contributions.
Beautifully said. I would love to hear from you, Estée, about the types of positive feedback you've received from your projects working together and alongside other autistic or neurodivergent artists, both from within and outside of the neurodivergent community.
What I like to see is how people are reorienting, like, there is a different way of perception. I think it's that openness that when that is achieved, and people aren't just coming and saying, oh yeah, I hear that autistic people, I don't know, and there's some trope perhaps associated with that. So the kind of feedback that really stands out to me is that openness. And then of course in the academic world, our work is really paid attention to, in terms of knowledge contribution.
I was also noticing that there's a lot of music. There's a lot of humming and singing that Adam does. And I wanted to know, how does music shape his interaction? And what do you think it offers him that maybe other forms of communication might not?
I'm always singing, actually. It's I sing throughout the entire day, really, about, to
Okay.
get us through the day, interestingly. And I think there's also, Adam, a musicality to your languaging. Do you want to speak more about music and influence and musicality and pace?
Of music is the one to move, and this is the flow of languaging, and the question about music is gearing the body
to have a dance of relation with things that I have to answer. The things in the world dance with vitality,
and I can feel them.
I'd love to hear a bit about the project you're going to be exhibiting at the Koffler Center. So it's part of an exhibit called Decade. Estée, can you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, the Decade exhibition is happening now. The one that's forthcoming is January 9th. And that is a video sound installation called What If My Body is a Beacon for the World? That's Adam's title for it. And that ended up just like we do at our studio. We don't really say, oh, we're going to do this project and this is how it's going to look, right? We're really experimental and processual in our methods. So we might have an idea. We might call that an enabling constraint, that we think within that idea. And then it kind of flows outward and it becomes something else. And we found that film was a really great way of answering what Adam calls the dancing or the rallying and the pace of things. So we could grab onto that pace, those wavelengths, that musicality of movement, of autistic movement specifically. And it took 2 years of thinking together and experimenting together with an endoscopic camera, with body cameras, to create these kind of immersive clips, if you will, that are hopefully leading participants in the exhibition to be immersed into what autistic perception feels and sees. So Adam is always described, I see the world like a forge in my eyes, right? So the visual field is coming in very fast. And so for dominant perception subtracts this detail. We can move from point A to B without much distraction, without going in another direction, right? We know what to do. We walk on a sidewalk, we go to work, we have our coffee, whatever. For autistic movement and perception, that's really different. So it might get really immersed in the detail. It might require this stick that Adam picks up to move and to navigate space, perhaps to blur the visual field, as we've suggested, to see the whole, right? And also sounds, they're luring, or the waft of a breeze might lure you in a different direction, or an autistic person in a different direction. Some autistics have said, I have to move to each room because the room is calling me to visit it, to answer. And so these patterns and these paces are a language. They're really a language. And visually, this language we thought could be expressed, but not in a traditional narrative film where we actually see Adam or other non-speakers at disassembly move. You're actually seeing, hopefully, what Adam sees.
Before we head off, Adam, I do want to know one question. I want to know, how challenging is it for you to co-direct with your own mother? Do you guys have many artistic differences or squabbles?
Pace is about coming together in movement. Same ways are a problem for autistic people, but my mom and other assistants work hard at supporting my ways of creating.
And this is what collaboration is all about. I am feeling all the time that my mom wants others to learn how to support neurodiverse ways of creating, and I make others need music of autistic pacing and language. So I am mostly okay with my mom dancing the fair game of support because she respects me. Ableism of others
is
is
what
what
is
is
harder
harder
for
for
me.
me. And
She
she
opens
opens
that
that
language to
language to
be
be
helpful.
helpful.
Fact is that
Without
her, I
her,
am
I
not
am
able
not
to
able
give
to give
others
others meaning about what support entails.
Thank you so much, Adam and Estée, for coming on Culturally Jewish. It was really, really a pleasure to meet both of you, and I wish you all the best of luck with your upcoming exhibit.
Thank you for having us.
I recently wrote a story about the editorial landscape of campus newspapers, how many student newspapers throughout the country are rejecting pro-Israel perspectives. It also focuses on what students are doing about it. This was an important story that I think highlights the cultural war that's taking place on campuses right now as students continue to adopt an anti-Israel and, in some cases, anti-Jewish perspective. My career as a journalist actually started at a student newspaper years ago, so this was a full circle moment that's allowed me to revisit my roots and see how much has changed in a post-October 7th world. My name is Mitchell Konski. I cover campus life and education for the Canadian Jewish News. If you want to support this work and everything else that we do at the CJN, please visit thecjn.ca/donate. And if you're Canadian, you can also get a tax receipt.
So to kick off our listings, I want to promote the event that we were just talking about with Adam and Estée, What If My Body is a Beacon for the World, which is running between January 9th and 26th in Toronto, and asks about neurodiverse differences in perception, contemplating the diversity of autistic people and their ways of living in the world. That is going on at the Koffler Center in Toronto.
So on Tuesday, January 21st at 9 p.m., we have something called Flaming Hot Art with sculptor and blacksmith Craig Caviar. That's an awesome last name. This is happening. It's happening with Temple B'nai Tikva. It is online. You could always find out more information on the program called Art and Scroll on YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram. But the basic idea is that the Art and Scroll studio and the American Guild of Judaic Art is going to present this metal artist, Craig Caviar, in conversation and presentation. You have to register in advance for free tickets, but basically he's quoted as saying, I create cool classical ironwork from the inferno of the forge. And the New Year opening episode of the Art and Scroll is going to feature the award-winning artist of magical metalwork, kicking off its 30th anniversary and their 5th year of programming. So if you can, check it out.
That sounds awesome. And that is in Calgary, yes?
That is happening in Calgary.
Cool. So over in Montreal, today on January 15th, if there are still spots left, at the Museum of Jewish Montreal, there's a workshop called Braiding the Threads of Jewish Life. Start off the new year by learning a new skill. So it's a weaving workshop led by art historian and crafter Shannon Stride, who uses her craft to bring together the diverse threads of her life, her Judaism and her Irish heritage, alongside the myriad places and people that have shaped her. So you're going to learn how to weave, and delve into some weaving techniques, and you're going to create a little mini tapestry, and all materials are included. So check that out in Montreal.
So happening in Toronto on January 16th at the Toronto Holocaust Museum is Raoul Wallenberg Day. 80 years after the disappearance of Raoul Wallenberg, this film asks the question, how does his legacy endure? It is a moving tribute to resilience, compassion, and the human spirit, written and directed by Louise Maillet. Au revoir les enfants. It's a poignant film inspired by Maillet's own childhood experiences, set against the backdrop of Nazi-occupied France. It tells the heartbreaking story of childhood innocence, friendship, and bravery.
Cool. Over in Vancouver on January 19th is the special prologue to the JCC Jewish Book Festival, which I'm sure we'll talk more about as it gets closer. So this prologue is called Israeli Authors Connect Over the Ocean. And I've actually read one of these books. If I was in Vancouver, I would totally go to this event. So the two authors are Maya Arud, talking about her book, The Hebrew Teacher. Highly recommend, David. You would love this book. It's a book of short stories, all with like an Israeli angle. She's an Israeli who moved to the States, and it just touches on such important themes. She actually wrote it like way before October 7th, but it really resonates now. Great. And then the other author is Eshkol Nevo, talking about his book, Inside Information, translated by Sandra Silverstein. These are both Hebrew books translated to English. So these two authors will be talking about them. So check that out in Vancouver, January 19th.
Thank you very much, Ilana. Ilana, stay safe, as I said earlier. Be well. We'll be thinking of you on the East Coast right now as you're in LA and everyone is dealing with all the LA fires. So just do what you got to do.
Thank you, David. See you guys soon.
Culturally Jewish is hosted by me, David Sklar, and
Ilana Zackon.
We're produced and edited by Michael Fraiman, and our theme music is by Sarah Siegel-Lazar. We're a member of the CJN Podcast Network. To support our work and everything the CJN does, visit thecjn.ca/donate to make a monthly donation and receive a charitable tax receipt.
Thanks so much for listening, and see you next time.
My name is Rivka Campbell, and I am the host of the CJN podcast, Rivkush. My podcast is a focus on Jews of color, talking about anything. It's really important for mainstream Jews to see that I am just as Jewish as you. The topics that interest you also interest me. I want to talk about Israel. You want to talk about Israel. I want to talk about food. Maybe it's not the food you want to talk about, but I want to talk about food. It's important that the person talking about Judaism, Israel, whatever, has a face like mine. It really, hopefully, changes the perception of Jews of color. To support my podcast and the rest of the CJN, please make a tax-deductible donation at thecjn.ca/donate.